much for thank you so much for being here. I especially want to thank my great colleagues from the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. Our webinar today is to talk about the benefits related to the Inflation Reduction Act. And this is legislation that will have real-time impact on families right here in the Southern Tier. So just some quick background. So the Inflation Reduction Act was actually passed in 2022 underneath the leadership of President Biden. And this is one of the largest climate investments in the history of our country, with a total of $370 billion in clean energy and climate funding. Now, we've been also making strides here in New York and making investments in the environment and climate change, trying to address that. And so with this historic funding from the Inflation Reduction Act, there are significant tax breaks, grants, credits, and loans that are available to you and your families that can help you to implement energy saving and money saving changes in your home, whether it's appliances, whether it's weatherization. And so at the same time, these things will also help you with saving money on the ever challenging utility bills. And so I am really honored and thrilled to be joined here today by President of the League of Conservation Voters, Julie Tighe, and then also Matthew Salton, who is with the League's Voters Education Fund. I want to thank you both for being here and for the work that you do every day on behalf of not only my constituents here in the Southern Tier, but across the state. So to kind of give everyone an overview of the agenda. So we're going to have a presentation from Julie and from Matthew, and then there will be time at the end of the presentation for questions and answering, but please feel free to enter your questions, comments in the chat, and we will go through them, myself and my team, and try to answer your questions accordingly as well. Also, as I mentioned, New York State, we've been making some significant investments in the environment as well. As a state, we've invested about $4.2 billion through the Environmental Bond Act, and that was approved last year by voters right here in New York. And this particular fund makes state funding available to municipalities for major environmental projects. And as we know, state and federal funds are integral to the work that we are trying to do as a state and reaching not only our climate change goals, but also ensuring that working families are seeing reductions in their utility costs as well. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie and Matthew, and I thank everyone for joining today's webinar.
Thank you so much. My name is Julie Tighe. I'm president of the New York League of Conservation Voters and the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. Thank you so much, Senator Webb, for hosting this important educational opportunity. You've been unwavering in your commitment to our environment, and you've been dedicated to advancing sustainable policies, and we appreciate that, both in your times thus far in the legislature and as we move forward into this coming session. So really excited about that. And thank you for highlighting the Environmental Bond Act, which money is really just starting to flow very recently, starting first and foremost with funding for water infrastructure projects, as well as funding for electric school buses. And we'll talk about school buses a little bit more later in the program. As you mentioned, we're here today to talk about really a monumental achievement. The Inflation Reduction Act, or it's often referred to as the federal climate law. This landmark legislation has marked a turning point in our commitment to a healthier and greener future. New York has long been a champion of environmental and climate issues, but this is really Congress and the president putting a marker down. As you noted, it is the biggest, boldest action and investment our nation has ever taken on climate change. And I think it actually might be the largest investment ever made in the entire world. So it really is an important program. The Clean Energy Plan works by incentivizing people and businesses to make greener choices, right? We're giving you incentives to do that through this federal funding and tax credits and loans and what have you. Helping to pave a way for a cleaner, more resilient future, demonstrating that environmental policies can be a win-win for both our wallets and for the planet. So I'm going to talk about the incentives and what's in the program overall in just a moment. I do want to thank everyone for logging on to this program. I hope you find this information useful and actionable. If you haven't already, please be sure to sign up for us for the NYLCVEF for more information. We have an Inflation Reduction Act consumer guide that we will make available. I think Matt will drop a link to that into the chat, but we have all that information available, and we will be updating it as more information becomes available from the state for a number of the rebate programs that we're going to highlight today. So with that, thanks, Matt. We have a lot of information available. So it's a big law. I think a lot of people aren't aware of this, but it was the big $1.9 trillion program that the federal government passed 2 years ago. And we're really going to highlight on it the climate components of it, which, as Senator noted, is just about $370 billion. If you want to go to the next slide. So this really touches a lot of things. It's called IRA or the IRA. It impacts clean energy, transportation, agriculture, healthy communities, clean manufacturing, funding to help us make our buildings cleaner, more efficient, investing in public lands and water. So it really touches on a wide swath of sectors in the programs that it's offering support for. Next slide. Some of the really key ones are on clean energy. A lot of what we're talking about on this slide is really for industry, right? There's a 10-year extension for clean energy program. So that's to help with renewable energy like solar and wind and offshore wind, also for battery storage. They did something a little bit different this year. It's been a tax credit, which means that you have to have a tax liability to pay for it. Now they've adopted something new called direct pay, which allows people who are not taxpayers, like the government, local governments, nonprofit organizations, and co-ops, they're now eligible for these programs as well. So that's really exciting endeavor, but it is a 30%, up to 30% tax incentive for the deployment of renewable energy, and that's something that we've taken advantage of. Highlighting here, South Fork Wind Farm is New York's first offshore wind farm. It has started providing wind power on Long Island late last year, and helping us also to support manufacturing, including doing wind turbine manufacturing at the Port of Albany. So we're very excited about the opportunities that these funds are bringing to New York, not sometime in the future, but today. There's a $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund that's going to help to catalyze private investment in clean energy. There's an additional 10% for renewable energy and energy storage projects in low-income communities. They recognize that it's more challenging in some of those areas to have funds necessary to do these kinds of projects. So really wanting to try and address low-income communities by giving extra funding and incentives to build in those neighborhoods. Next slide. Transportation, this is one, there's been a tax credit. It was limited before for electric vehicles. Some of the car companies actually reached the previous threshold. Now there's no more threshold anymore, right? You have up to $7,500 tax credit for electric vehicles. It's based on how much of the vehicle is basically made in America and how efficient the vehicle is. So for the first time, we're having a $4,000 credit for used vehicles, as well as the $7,500 tax credit for new vehicles. So this is really to help more people get EVs, and including on the secondary market, since a lot of people are not buying brand new off the lot cars. A lot of people do buy secondary cars, used cars. So this is the first time that there's a tax credit available for that. There's funding available for you to put infrastructure in your home to do charging at home, which is where you get the most inexpensive charging opportunities. So up to 30% of the cost of EV infrastructure for your home, up to $1,000 is available. And in addition, New York State offers up to $2,000 for rebates for new EVs. So that is something that can be combined with the tax credits that are available from the federal government. That became available January 1st as point of sale, meaning previously you had to file for that, claim it when you were filing your taxes. Now, when you go to buy a car, you can get that reduction right at the dealership so that they're handling the paperwork. You don't have to deal with that. It will just reduce the price of the vehicle when you're paying for it on the lot. And that's new in 2024. There's also $2 billion in grants to help convert manufacturing facilities to make electric vehicles, because a part of this incentives in the IRA is to bring more manufacturing back to the United States for these clean technologies. Next slide. There are some limits for EVs. For cars, it has to be $55,000 or less for you to be eligible for the tax credit. For SUVs, vans, and pickup trucks, which tend to be more expensive, the cap is at $80,000. So it really looks at the model to see how much tax credit is available, or that you're eligible for tax credit at all. It's also limited to income, to not allow for high income earners to be eligible for the credit. So the cap is $150,000 for a single person, $225,000 for a household, or $300,000 for joint filers. So if you make more than that, then you're not eligible for the tax credits, but the majority of New Yorkers are going to be eligible for those tax credits. And again, it's starting at point of sale, and it's based in part on where the battery and some of the other components were made. Trying to again bring that manufacturing back to the United States as part of the incentives here. For used vehicles, we touched on the sale of the vehicle has to be less than $25,000, and the car has to be at least 2 years old, and it can only qualify once for that particular vehicle. So we're trying to get it out there, but it's got to be reasonably put out, and the IRS keeps evolving their rules related to this. There's funding available for medium and heavy duty vehicles. So the IRS provides tax credits of up to 30% for electric, medium, and heavy duty vehicles like school buses or garbage trucks. So that's going to help to incentivize companies and governments to start moving to these other types of vehicles. There's also, from the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was passed a little bit earlier, there's funding for electric school buses as well that are just grants. We've gotten funding for the first round. We got about 184 buses covered in New York State. They just announced at the end of most recently, I think it was just actually a week or two ago, a second round of grants that authorized funding for another 200 electric school buses in New York. And the state of New York has, as I mentioned earlier, has already started rolling out funding as part of the Bond Act. There's a $500 million in total. $100 million of it has already started to become available for school districts to go out, and school bus companies to get electric school buses. So this is a really exciting time as we transition to all electric school buses over the next 15 or so years. There are funding to help support healthy communities. There's a $3 billion block grant called for environmental justice and environmental and climate justice in the state of New York. Our partners at We Act for Environmental Justice are helping the state, local governments, nonprofits, and schools apply for the federal grants that are available. So they are helping. They're a what's called a Tighe. They're a technical assistance center, so they'll be able to help local groups and nonprofits and schools apply for these fundings. So we encourage you, if you have questions about that program, to reach out to their email, which we've listed here is below. It's ejtctac@weact.org. Next slide. So buildings are actually one of the biggest sources of climate pollution in our state. Transportation and buildings are neck and neck. But here we have funding to make more people trained to conduct energy efficiency, to improve energy efficiency of our buildings. We're an old state. We have old buildings. I used to live in Albany, New York, and my house was built in 1853. I can tell you it's not terribly energy efficient. And I'm sure a lot of communities in your district are in the same situation where they're very old and they're not built terribly efficiently. So first is there's $200 million to help with energy efficiency job training so that we get workers ready to do the work of making our buildings more efficient. There's also nearly $9 billion in home energy rebates that are available to help reduce the cost of heating and cooling and doing other things that require heating and cooling in your home. So for example, there's funding and rebates for air source heat pumps, for electric ranges, for heat pump hot water heaters, for dryers. So there's new technologies that can be out there that are not reliant on natural gas, that can be much more energy efficient, that we'll be providing funding for. And there'll be rebates that we'll talk about a little bit more. We're expecting them to be rolled out at some point later in 2024. And there's tax credits for homeowners and building owners to make the whole building envelope more energy efficient. So why do we need to move to more energy efficiency, right? We know that if we're more energy efficient, we're going to have cleaner air because we're going to be creating less pollution by doing that. We're going to use less energy. That's going to help save consumers money. We're going to be able to take advantage of these incentives to help people get new appliances. So you'll be able to upgrade the appliances you have in your home and get assistance from the federal government to make it less expensive to do that. So our friends at Rewiring America have created a savings calculator where you can put in and get an estimate of how much money you could be eligible for from the Inflation Reduction Act. So we've gone and we have the website listed there, but if you put in some information, so it's what your zip code is, whether you rent or you own, what the household income is, how big your household is, how you file your taxes. And so then you can calculate it and they'll give you an estimate. It's not 100% precise, but you can get up to $14,000, which is up to 50% of the cost of various projects that you're doing, including $9,000 in tax credits on top of that $14,000, as well as helping you reduce your energy savings cost by over $1,000 a year. So these are all estimates. That would bring a total of incentives of about $23,000 if you took advantage of all of the things that you were eligible for under that program. So briefly, just want to point out there are tax credits and there are rebates. And I touched on this a little bit before, but tax credits are only eligible if you owe taxes, right? If you don't owe anything, then you don't get benefit from the tax credit. So right now, like some of the programs that are available are like the car tax credit. That is where you claim your tax credit to reduce the amount of your federal tax bill. Rebates, on the other hand, are given regardless of whether or not you owe taxes. They're handled very often at the point of sale. So if you buy an electric car, again, the state of New York is providing you with a rebate, and there's actually rebates for a whole bunch of other things that are coming again later this year that we'll get into in just a second. But they're two different programs. So things that have tax credits, right, and they're all available now, right? You don't have to wait for them. They're already eligible. They were eligible in 2023. So if you purchased, if you got battery storage at your home, for example, you'll be able to file on your tax credit, on your tax filings this year, a 30% credit, to reduce the amount of tax liability you owe overall. There's a tax credits if you do geothermal in your home, for new electric vehicles we talked about already, rooftop solar installation, heat pumps and air conditioners and heaters, heat pump hot water heaters, weatherization, electric vehicle charging, and electric panels. And some of them are percentages, some of them are hard dollars. So it all depends. There's nuanced information available on each of those items on the Rewiring for America tax page. The rebates that are coming, these are something that the state of New York is administering for the federal government. And so we're expecting this to come out later this year. But there's, again, going to be up to $8,000 for a heat pump air conditioner or heater, up to $4,000 to upgrade your electrical panel. Because if you're adding new electrical appliances or EV charging, your electrical panel probably doesn't have sufficient capacity for that. So you need to upgrade your panel to do that. Again, energy efficiency rebates, electric wiring, heat pump hot water heater, weatherization of your home, putting in an electric or induction stove, a heat pump clothes dryer. So we have a bunch of of appliances that are going to be eligible for rebates in the coming year. Again, the eligibility is based on where you live, right? So there's all based on an area media income. So for Ithaca, for example, the median income is $76,209. So if you're below $60,000, or below just about $61,000 of your annual income, then you can get up to 100% of the project covered. So they're giving this to you for free because they know that folks who are lower income can't afford to spend as much money to make these improvements, even though those are the people who will very much benefit the most from reducing the amount of energy that you're using. For people who are between $61,000 and $114,000, you can get up to 50% of the project cost covered using these tax credits and rebate programs. So it is a very exciting program that's eligible for a lot of people are eligible for. New York has some additional programs beyond what the federal government has. There's a program called the Assisted Home Performance with Energy Star program that allows you to get up to $5,000 per project, depending on your income, for various programs. There's a heat pump program where you can get between $1,000 and $4,000 in incentives, both to seal and insulate your home to make purchasing a heat pump more effective. If you switch to geothermal, you can get up to $5,000 in a tax credit on top of the federal government's tax credit. For clean heat, you can get up to $2,000 per $10,000 of BTU from ground source heat pumps through National Grid. So you can get it not just from the state of New York, but also from your utility. As I mentioned, we've developed a guide that lays out the various projects that are available, how much money you can get for the various programs that are out there. We have it on our website, NYLCVEF.org. Thanks, Matt, for dropping that in the chat again, so that we can make that information more available for people to go and find it. And that's all we have for right now. Follow us on social media.
Thank you, Julie, so much for the presentation. We do have a question in the chat. So again, if there are other questions, please put them there. This question is from Wendy Alberg. Any news about when rebates will be available for electric vehicles?
Matt, you want to take that?
Sure thing. So yeah, so as Julie mentioned during the presentation, that $7,500 tax credit for electric vehicles is available as the tax credit, and as of January 1st of this year is also available at point of sale as a rebate. So you should be good as long as the car matches the requirements set by the IRS for those certain categories. And right now, I think there are about 19 different models that meet that criteria. You should be good to get that rebate.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that. There's also some questions we had gotten in advance. Amy from Enfield just completed a ground-mounted solar installation and was wondering what provisions in the IRA she could take advantage of.
Yeah, so yep. So there's that 30% covering the cost of solar that she can tap into when dealing with her contractor for the project. So it should cover about 30% of the project.
Then that should be eligible when you file for your taxes this year, right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. I have some other questions, but I also wanted to make sure for folks who are here, please put your questions in the Q&A portion. Okay.
For the question about Cortland, if you want to drop in the zip code, we can look it up for you and get you. Thank you very much. We can give you.
I'll share the question for folks who also are wondering. It goes back to the calculator. Do Do you happen to know the income eligibility range for homeowners in Cortland? I assume this range is higher than in Ithaca. Thank you.
Yep. So basically, and I can get the link and then post it after. So the way they do it is that they don't want to limit anyone from being able to access it based on where they live. If they set a national standard of this amount for income, suddenly you're going to box a lot of people out because they live in higher income areas, but they might not necessarily make as much as their neighbors. So they wanted to do it on an individualized basis by zip code, because we know that in places like New York, where even if you're making more than in other places across the country, you might not necessarily have as much disposable income. So it's all based on that area median income based on zip code. And let me get that and I'll put it in the chat for everybody.
Matt, why don't you, I don't think the chat is available to everyone, or I don't know, I'm not sure if people can see that. But why don't you maybe reshare your screen so you can show, and then we can provide people with the link for that as well, because the question is also similarly for Greater Binghamton, like what the ranges are.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah, I
sure
think
thing.
portion too, if we can answer, there's an option to answer live. We could put it there as well.
Yeah.
Great.
And then while
And if
you're
I could
doing,
get the zip code again.
for Cortland, person put it in.
Yeah, no, yeah, we have that.
And then income eligibility for home energy improvements in Greater Binghamton. That's a question from Amy Williamson. I can give you a sample Greater Binghamton zip as well, and of course sharing the screen. So like 13850 could be an example. I don't know if Amy, if you want to put in a zip code, I can look up as well. I also see here in the Q&A, also from Bo Harbin. Bo is also a county legislator in Cortland County. So Cortland County is in the process of modernizing the heat and cooling for our county courthouse. To whom should the county reach out in order to secure additional IRA funding beyond what was secured by New York State Assembly Member Kellis? Thank you.
So this is going to be like the direct pay programs are coming directly from the IRS, right? So that's where you can go. There is information available about the various tax credits on the IRS's website. I think that's the main place where you would try to go for that. And maybe maybe Matt, you could say out loud what these ranges are.
Yeah, so I can't get the ranges just like that.
Thanks,
Basically, folks need to put it in because what it does is the lower range is from 80% of the area median income. So to calculate that, you look it up for that zip code, and then you have to do 80%, and then the higher end is 150%. So the easiest way to look up for your individual circumstance is just to go on and Rewiring America's calculator will do it for you.
Okay. And Matt, you put the link to the calculator in the.
Yep. So I answered a question with that, and yeah, I don't believe I can just put it in the general chat.
Yeah,
So
if
I
you
can
go
just kind of send it.
I don't know what the people can see on the back end, but in the answered questions, there's a link in a response to Amy Williamson.
Yep.
And
yeah, Amy's inquiring about Johnson City 13790.
right, which again, same thing. We like you have to go in and look on the website.
Okay. We have a few more questions too. Thank you, Amy and Bo and Wendy, for your questions. Did we get the question from Wendy about federal rebates? Oh, yes, we already answered that.
Yeah, we did.
Yep.
Okay, so John from Cortland is wondering what New York is doing to build up our electrical grid to make us ready to meet our CLCPA goals.
So on that front, the state of New York has committed by law, right, to get to 100% clean energy by 2040. And there are a number of different subcategories within that, including getting to 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035. It was 6,000 megawatts in law, but it's been increased to 10,000 megawatts for distributed solar. And so the state has under contract about 75 or 80% of, or they did have under contract until recently, for renewable energy projects between both land-based wind and solar and offshore wind. Because of some concerns related to, how long it takes between contracts being awarded and when they're going through permitting and things like that, and what happened with the inflation internationally. There has been some cancellations of some projects, but the state is right now getting ready to receive awards or applications for offshore wind projects so that we can get back up to what we need to, because we had in the fall we had about a little over 8 gigawatts of offshore wind under contract. And I mentioned that first project is already spinning. Not all the turbines are complete and on board yet, but half of them are, and they are providing energy already for Long Island. And then onshore, there's a slightly longer process, but there is a new competitive bidding process that's happening, that will be happening shortly, where project applications are going to be due this spring. And then they'll be awarding them also relatively quickly after that, which would put us on very good standing to reach those goals. One of the things that's in the governor's budget this year is a proposal that would help streamline the transmission line permitting process, so that there's still opportunities for public input, but it's there's more tighter timeframes, because right now it takes between 3 and 7 years for transmission lines to be able to bring the energy from where it's generated to where it needed. And so we're trying to expedite that process while making sure there's appropriate local input on the various programs, and trying to encourage upgrading existing transmission corridors so that's less impact on the environment at large to move those along. And there's a lot of work being done on battery storage to get more battery energy storage out there. So we have a ways to go. There is a path. The energy part is the easy part. And I think right now we're starting to look much more robustly at buildings. And last year the state passed a law that requires all new constructed buildings to be, fossil free. After a certain time period. It's earlier for smaller buildings. I think it's 2026, and I think it's 2029 for larger buildings, which is I think 7 stories or greater. I'm not gonna lie, I don't have the precise numbers right off the top of my head on that one, but that was big for new construction, and we're starting to look at what can we do for existing, right? We really need to make all these buildings much more energy efficient, because we won't need as much energy if we're using less energy in the first place. And I think there's a lot of work to be done on that, including making sure that when we're building out transmission lines, for example, that we're also accounting for the fact that, in 10 years from now and 20 years from now, there'll be many more electric vehicles on the road. There'll be many more people relying on electric for heating and cooling. And so building it now, knowing that it's coming in the future, so that we're not having to go back and build it twice. So trying to factor some of those things in as these projects move forward, while being very mindful of keeping an eye on ratepayer impacts. So I think that is a delicate balance that the state is trying to measure.
And I would also add, just in the area of battery storage, right here in the Southern Tier, we have some great higher ed institutions that have been making some really outstanding breakthroughs as pertains to not only battery storage, but also, with the lithium ion battery, most certainly through Professor Whittingham, who won the Nobel Prize for his efforts around batteries as an example. So there's also things happening right here in the district that we can most certainly be proud of, but also projects are being worked on as well. I see another question from Wendy. Is the $2,000 rebate for electric vehicles from New York State funds or federal? I can't find info on irs.gov for rebates, only tax credits.
So the $2,000 is from the state. So you can get that on top of the up to $7,500 from the federal government. So they have that rebate, like it depends on the car. Again, it depends on the price of the vehicle. You know, I got a Tesla, it was too expensive, so I got a $500 rebate as opposed to if it's less than, I forget what the threshold, if it's 50 or if it's 55. It must be 50, I think. But if it's less than that, you can get $2,000 in rebate. So there is that opportunity. And again, you got it on top of the federal government's tax credit.
Yeah,
which is
and that 7,500 is a tax credit, but right now you can access it at point of sale as though it were a rebate. So they might not have language up on the IRS right now to reflect that because it's very new, but that's what was written into the law.
Okay. Great. A few more questions. Mary in Johnson City is curious about what resources are available for low income folks to get a heat pump in their home.
So there are both tax credits and rebates. So if you're low income, and you may not have, tax liability, then the tax credit is not going to help you, right? That is a restriction in the statute. Although Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there are going to be rebates that the state is going to make available for heat pumps later this year, that are going to be, I forget, and I don't have it up on front of me here, but up to $8,000. We're making that $8,000. Okay, great. And there's also the state offers some support. Yes, in this one.
Yep. So then there's also the $5,000 through the utility.
Right. So you can get funding from, potentially from, is this National Grid or is this different territory? Who's your utility provider?
Well, we have National Grid in some parts and other parts it's a NYSEG.
NYSEG. Okay. So you have to look on, you have to look at what your utility offers. All the utilities offer different programs, but they all offer programs to help with more energy efficiency. And sometimes that could be, by the way, the state offers, you can have an energy efficiency audit done on your home to make that, to help you make decisions about what's available and what would make the most, get the most bang for your buck. Very often insulation first.
Absolutely.
Yes. When I worked in government, there was a terrible hurricane after Hurricane Irene. We went into Schoharie County and we were helping some of these buildings, clean up after the storm, and they were insulated with newspaper, right? So homes from like the 1800s. So it's not efficient. So very often, you can having that insulation keeps your house cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. And it's definitely one of those biggest bang for your buck pieces. And that, again, there's funding available for that from the Inflation Reduction Act.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. And then just circling back with regards to electric vehicles, federal rebates for electrical vehicles, any news on where things are at with those being available?
Yep. So that's the same thing in terms of that $7,500 credit is available at point of sale. So when you go to the dealership, it is as though it were a rebate, where you will get that price off. You don't have to then go file it on your taxes.
If for some reason someone didn't get it at point of sale, what could be done? Would they have to just go back to the dealer and, have it remedied, or?
If it's pre 2024, it was not eligible. It was not available. Right. Okay. So you can't go backwards on that.
Okay. And that was Wendy's question with regards to federal rebates.
Yeah.
Okay. We have another question Janice in Lansing is wondering about electric vehicle incentives. This seems to be a very popular topic. Will these last for a number of years, or is it important to act quickly?
Yeah, so I'd say, actually, no, it's not important to act quickly on this in terms of the funding element from it. So right now, this funding is available. You can get your car with this rebate at the point of sale or through the tax credit. And this funding is through 2032 by statute. But the nice thing about it is that sort of the longer we have it on the books, the more that car manufacturers are taking notice of it, and they're going to change their practices to make more things in America, and then more cars will actually benefit from it. So right now, there are those 19 models that are applicable to those amounts of funding, so you can get that discount on it. But then again, as we wait, more cars are going to be made, and they're going to qualify for it, and suddenly we're going to have a lot more options for it.
And there's linkages to vehicles being made by union workers and to where the batteries are manufactured. And so there is a lot of work being done to manufacture batteries, in particular in the United States.
Okay, and I have one more question. So this comes from Mike in Ithaca. Can I do an installation myself and take advantage of these incentives, or are there specific installers I am required to use?
Yeah, so there are going to be a number of contractors that sort of go through the process to become eligible for receiving these things, and they have to go through different apprenticeship standards and labor agreements and things like that. So it will be done through those contractors.
So no, you can't do it yourself. Those sort of
So no home improvement enthusiasts. Gotcha.
But again, like the appliances are going to be rebates. So that's, you can get the appliance if you want to install yourself. Obviously, installing it yourself is cheaper if you're able to do that. To do some of this other work, you will need to use a contractor that's certified.
And you also mentioned earlier in the presentation that for those things, definitely folks can go through NYSERDA to get access to those supports, correct?
Yep.
Yes, NYSERDA is going to be the one who's managing the rebate programs for New York.
Mhm.
So the sort of the federal government lets the states make some decisions about how exactly they're going to deploy the funds.
Yeah,
And if we
basically
share again the links, I know we put up for the calculator. Can you just share your screen again with the NYSERDA link for folks to be able to capture?
sure thing. And I can also send a list of different links to your office, Senator, and then if you guys want to send it out to all those
No, we
folks who
definitely
registered.
Yes. And then I was just checking to see if we had any more questions. Oh, it's a comment that there are at least 2 certified contractors in Ithaca now. Thank you, Wendy, for sharing that. So as we're getting close to time here, just wanted to offer again to you, Julie, or you, Matt, any other remarks or closing comments? And then, of course, if there are other questions, we have a few more minutes. Just want to make sure we get everyone's questions answered.
I think it's really important as a starting point of like people knowing that there's funding that's available or coming, so that people can be thinking about that as you're looking at what decisions you're making for improving your home, how to make it more energy efficient. Really, we want people to be able to take advantage of all the federal funding that's available, because it's really a unique and historic moment to be able to do that. Not only to help fight climate change, but really to reduce your energy costs and to reduce how inefficient your buildings may be. I also want to point out, we've been very fortunate, so far between the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the CHIPS Act, the state has gotten about $47 billion in investments in clean tech and clean energy, including Lansing Renewables in Tompkins County got about $5.4 million for 3 megawatts of solar energy. So it's hyper local, but we've seen, $2 billion for clean power coming to New York, $547 million for biomanufacturing, $2 billion for clean energy manufacturing, almost $700 million for EVs and batteries, and $41 billion for semiconductors and electronics. As you all have heard, Micron is obviously getting a huge chunk of that to come to Syracuse, and the surrounding area will clearly benefit from that. So it's exciting to see all this investment coming, to the United States for helping us to transition to a clean energy economy.
And Matt, did you have any additional comments you wanted to share?
No, I think Julie got it.
Okay.
And Charlene is asking about resources
Yep.
being printed somewhere online. Again, we have a guide called an IRA consumer guide that we can make available. It's on our website, NYLCVEF.org / hold on, Matt, you put it out there somewhere. IRA-guide, very subtle. And we're going to be updating that. NYSERDA has information on its website. That's NYSERDA.gov. I think that's our website. And then the IRS has information also available about the tax credits. It is complicated because there's a number of different federal agencies that have this information available to them. And that's why we wanted to put the consumer information into one place for people to help them find, at least starting where the resources are. Again, our friends at Rewiring America have resources that you can help to help find as well. So there are a number of places where this information is available to try and get more people to be taking advantage of all the credits that are available. I do think, to your point about the certified contractors, I think they're going to start selling to their customers that they have these credits available to them to help them sell their wares.
Yes, for sure. One of the other important pieces with this work, and thank you so much, Julie and Matt, for the very informative presentation. It is when you start hearing, 47 billion, 2 billion, 300 million, right? These figures for folks who are here, but also will be watching this later, a lot of questions what does this mean for me in real time? And so I think it's important that as we continue to take advantage of these great policy advancements in the environmental space, but also significant financial investments, it's really important that we stay connected. And so again, I would encourage folks to, reach out to my office most certainly, and of course, reach out to Julie and Matt at the Conservation League of Voters, because it is very complex, but we are here to try to, as I often say, clear the mist of these great initiatives and policies to really help folks connect in real time with these great and necessary resources. Another thing that I would be remiss if I didn't lift up in this moment is that all of these investments also lead to really great paying jobs and opportunities for economic advancement. And we know that continues to be a challenge for many folks in our communities here in the Southern Tier, but across the state. And so I think we're at a really opportune time to not only continue to work on addressing the ever-growing challenges of climate change, but also really provide a much better way for economic advancement and a more equitable way for economic advancement for many families and small businesses, most certainly here in the Southern Tier and across the state. And so again, I want to thank you, Julie. Thank you, Matt, for the great work that you do at your organization. I want to thank everyone who tuned in today on your lunch hour, if it is your lunch hour, for this important conversation. I want to thank our teams for pulling this together. And I will just, emphasize again, if you have any questions or concerns, however we can be helpful, please reach out. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and has a great weekend.
Thank you.
Check and see if there was another question. I saw something pop up. Yes, this is important. Will this Zoom presentation be available later to rewatch and share with others also? And the answer is yes. And Julie, you just want to share again how folks will be able to rewatch it?
We're going to post it on our YouTube page, which is youtube.com/NYLCV. And we'll push it out through our listserv. I don't know if you are able to do the
Oh,
same.
yes, we'll definitely do
Okay.
the same. Oh, yes, we have a YouTube channel.
Perfect.
Yes, so we will do that. Thank you, Charlene, for your question, everyone, for your questions, your engagement. And we look forward to continuing to do the good work. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.